Welcome back to the richest player in the world. Midas is entering Aurum with a beginner's level and a billionaire's idea of pocket change. Today, one impossible sword turns a shopping trip into an ambush, which is especially awkward because he can't actually use the thing. He starts by converting a perfectly legal and extremely noticeable pile of money. Then the market bell rings and every hustler in Aurum suddenly smells fresh income. Midas walks straight into the crowd because subtle entrances have never really been his thing. His first few trades nudge prices upward almost immediately. A tout tries rushing him into a deal, but Midas isn't quite that easy to milk. Instead, he opens a clean ledger and starts recording everything. Every purchase gets a timestamp, every seller gets a note, and suddenly this shopping spree has an audit trail. Naturally, spending that loudly earns him an audience. He keeps his real name hidden, although the mysterious rich guy act isn't exactly lowering his profile. With the featured auction about to begin, he follows the crowd inside. And just like that, the newest player in the room has everyone watching him. Up on the rail, Vesper is watching too, but she's paying attention to the people watching Midas. She spots the same faces tracking his money from stall to stall, so she slips into the crowd for a closer look. First, she tests whether the rich beginner has any awareness at all. She brushes past him without taking a thing, which for Vesper practically counts as a handshake. Then she leaves a warning token beside his ledger. Midas finds it exactly when she wants him to. Instead of panicking, he looks straight at her, calm enough to make this interesting. Vesper jokes about his expensive entrance because apparently surveillance can still be flirty. Midas points out 3 bidders moving in the same rhythm. She refuses to name whoever is controlling them. Free information has limits. Still, she takes the better viewing angle and keeps watching. By the time Midas reaches the auction floor, Vesper has quietly decided this disaster is worth following. The man running that disaster is Rook, and he greets the room like everyone's favorite trustworthy uncle. Then he unveils Ashfang's fang behind enough magical glass to make it look priceless. The damage numbers are ridiculous, and Rook makes sure nobody misses them. What he doesn't emphasize is the equip requirement buried near the bottom. He plants one bidder near the front to get things moving. A tiny touch to his pin cues the second one. Then, Rook personally invites Midas to inspect the weapon because the biggest wallet deserves special attention. He confirms that ownership is unrestricted, which sounds reassuring until you notice what he didn't answer. Asked whether Midas can wield it, Rook suddenly becomes a professional sentence dodger. Vesper cuts through the performance with one very deliberate cough. Rook smiles right through the warning and pretends nothing happened. Then he opens the bidding before anyone can linger on the fine print. Within seconds, the room is loud, excited, and doing exactly what he planned. Midas opens with a measured bid instead of throwing the whole bank at it. Both planted bidders answer so quickly they might as well be sharing a keyboard. He raises once more, not to win yet, but to find their ceiling. Then he checks the accounts backing them and finds the same guarantor. The crowd thinks he's showing off. Midas is actually paying for a map of the scam. Before going higher, he asks whether every bid and disclosure is time-stamped. The exchange confirms it, and Rook has no idea how useful that answer will become. Midas pushes past the amount the first 2 plants were built to defend. Rook scrambles and exposes a third bidder trying to keep the price alive. When all 3 finally go silent, Midas takes the lot. The ownership seal transfers without a problem. Then the red equip restriction appears, right on schedule and much too late to be helpful. Midas admits the sword was overpriced, but the transaction history might be worth every coin. He tries the hilt anyway, and the system rejects him immediately. The level and proficiency requirements are brutal. Merchant is nowhere on the guest list. So Ashfang goes straight into storage without a single heroic swing. The room laughs because watching a whale beach himself is apparently free entertainment. Midas ignores them and asks for the complete bidder log. Rook insists the listing was perfectly legal, which isn't the same thing as saying it was honest. That distinction is exactly what Midas writes down. He lets Vesper inspect the ownership seal, and even she confirms the blade is genuine. So the weapon itself isn't fake. The sales pitch is where all the interesting rot lives. Meanwhile, Rook is watching Midas's inventory a little too closely. Midas locks down every valuable trade setting before asking what comes next. Rook offers a private demonstration that will supposedly prove Ashfang's value, and Midas records the offer word for word, because this lesson has already charged tuition once. They move into a quieter contract hall where Rook can't hide behind the crowd. Midas opens a tightly limited party agreement instead of accepting a friendly handshake. The route, return conditions, and purpose of the trip all go into writing. Rook finally names the ruined toll road as the destination. Midas adds a no hostile action clause, which feels unnecessary only if you've ignored literally everything so far. He also makes Rook state the monster level on the record. The broad, loot-sharing language gets cut before it can become another surprise. Access to Ashfang stays limited too. Ownership doesn't mean Rook gets near it again. Vesper mocks Midas for becoming cautious 5 minutes after buying the world's fanciest paperweight. He asks whether she's volunteering as a witness. She says no while making absolutely no effort to leave. Midas signs only the narrowed terms. Then an automatic evidence copy goes to escrow, safely outside Rook's reach. Before they even leave Aurum, Midas tests his return stone. The system says travel is restricted on the route he just accepted. He shows Rook the error instead of quietly filing it away. Rook blames the launch event, and the excuse almost sounds reasonable. Almost, because the Public Service Board shows no citywide outage. Every other return route is working normally. Midas adds the contradiction to his ledger. Then he asks for a delay, mostly to see how Rook reacts. Rook immediately manufactures urgency and insists they have to move now. Vesper disappears onto the rooftops, which is her version of saying she's definitely coming. Midas knows the situation is wrong and chooses to proceed anyway. At least the escrow copy goes out before he crosses the gate. Then the party marker activates, and the safest part of this terrible plan is officially behind him. Outside the city, Midas keeps Rook ahead where he can watch him. It doesn't take long for a second party marker to appear behind them. Midas turns, but the road looks completely empty. The extra signal pulses a fraction too late. He compares it with Rook's live marker and confirms the delay is consistent. Someone isn't following them directly. They're relaying the signal. Midas asks Rook about it without revealing how much he already knows. Rook gives an answer that contradicts the contract almost immediately. Another note goes into the ledger. They leave the main road only when they reach the fork named in writing. Then dust rises behind them with no visible traveler attached. So yes, they have company. And no, it isn't the friendly kind. At the signed fork, Rook gestures toward an unlisted ravine path. Midas checks the contract map and refuses to follow it. Rook pushes, but the rich beginner calmly pushes him right back onto the documented causeway. Fresh cart tracks show that someone cleared out in a hurry. Then Rook invents a warning about patrols ahead. Midas checks the local hazard overlay and finds absolutely nothing. No patrol marker, no alert, not even a bored guard taking a lunch break. He fires a cheap flare across the road instead. The light catches tripwire dust stretched exactly where Rook wanted him walking. Midas steps over it and lets Rook perform surprise for an audience of one. While they continue, he loosens the consumables in his pack. The toll road is close now, and pretending this is still a demonstration would be insulting. So Midas follows, but this time, he's preparing for the trap instead of merely documenting it. The ruined toll road is basically an ambush designer's dream. Midas stops beneath a decayed gantry and reads the space before taking another step. 2 collapsed wagons create cover on one side. The road itself narrows into a perfect channel for charging monsters. His return stone is still disabled because of course it is. He sets Ashfang's chest in the open where nobody can pretend it vanished. Then he tells Rook to begin the demonstration they actually agreed to. Rook quietly moves outside the contract circle. A horn sounds from the ridge. Hidden crew members close the rear route and the whole layout finally makes sense. This isn't a bad demonstration, it's a very carefully prepared kill box. Midas draws his basic novice weapon and leaves Ashfang sealed. Then he backs toward the gantry supports, choosing the one piece of terrain Rook clearly forgot to price. The first ash boars crest the ridge exactly when the horn tells them to. Midas watches their aggro pulses alternate and realizes the stampede is being managed. Then Rook cancels the party marker, dropping the last bit of friendly protection. The system immediately flags hostile action. Midas barely avoids the opening rapier thrust. The next strike tears through his shoulder guard and leaves a shallow cut underneath. He grabs Ashfang's hilt on instinct, hoping the emergency changes something. It doesn't. The system rejects him just as hard as before. So the legendary weapon goes back into storage, still expensive and still completely useless. Midas throws a flash vial across the lead bore instead. The blinded beast veers sideways and knocks the next charge out of line. That's when Midas realizes the crew isn't trying to beat him fairly, they're waiting for death drops. He moves behind the left wagon before they can collect anything. With brute force off the table, Midas starts spending consumables like emergency capital. An ice tonic freezes a narrow strip of mud in front of the stampede. The lead boar hits it, slides sideways, and crashes into the barricade. A beginner caught in the mess gets Midas's healing drought before he uses one on himself. Then smoke cuts off the crew's view of their target. Every used item gets marked as a deliberate loss because apparently he audits himself during attempted murder. Next comes a fire flask under the gantry rope. Midas baits Rook toward the frozen strip and waits for him to commit. The ledger case catches one rapier line, which is not what accounting equipment is normally for. Another retreat costs Midas a shallow cut, but now he can see the rot running through the beam overhead. He counts the next monster pulse and finally has the timing he needs. The gantry is about to become the most expensive barricade Rook never bought. Midas lights the prepared rope right as the next aggro pulse hits. Then he pulls the stampede directly beneath the gantry. He dives behind the old stone toll plinth. The burning rope snaps a second later. Down comes the decayed beam, smashing across the road and splitting the battlefield in half. Rook ends up separated from two of his own accomplices. 3 monsters are trapped on the far side. More importantly, the beginners stay on the safe side with Midas. He uses the rubble to narrow the only lane still open. Rook orders his crew to ignore the bystanders and secure the loot. That single command destroys whatever was left of the friendly demonstration story. Midas copies the combat log straight to escrow. Then he gets back on his feet, injured but very much not dead. 2 uninvolved beginners are still trapped behind the broken wagon. Midas shouts them a safe route before worrying about himself. A barrier scroll catches the next boar, and there goes another small fortune. The smoke gets thick enough for Midas to lose track of Rook. Then a crescent dagger pins the monster's harness to the ground. Vesper drops from the ruined gantry like she was waiting for the most dramatic entrance available. She complains about sloppy criminals while saving everyone from them. Midas guides the beginners behind the stone plinth. Vesper cuts a second harness and turns another charge harmlessly aside. He doesn't waste time asking whose side she's on. Right now, she's on the useful side. Through the smoke, Rook circles back toward Ashfang's chest. Midas moves to intercept him. Then one beginner falls, and Midas chooses the person over the loot without hesitating. That choice puts Midas a step too late at the weapon chest. Rook grabs a pouch of tradable loot and starts backing toward the ridge. Vesper disarms one accomplice before he can follow. She demands safe passage for the beginners, making her priorities clear for once. Midas burns another barrier scroll to seal the lane. Vesper vaults across it because walking around would apparently ruin the image. She lends Midas one crescent dagger for cover. He uses the flat of it to knock a harness line away instead of pretending he's suddenly an assassin. Then he returns the dagger immediately. Vesper looks genuinely amused. Honesty is apparently more surprising than the ambush. Rook fires a retreat flare from the ridge. Midas blocks the nearest exit with rubble, but the upper path stays open, and Rook has exactly the gap he needs. Midas follows him only as far as the ridge mouth. Then a beginner cries out behind him. He turns back, choosing an injured stranger over one stolen pouch. Rook escapes through a recall breach and leaves his own crew in the dirt. Midas still captures the exact timestamp. 2 abandoned accomplices are now staring at the man who decided they were disposable. Midas orders everyone to hold their attacks. Revenge can wait. First, he stabilizes the injured beginner. Vesper retrieves her dagger and, somehow, doesn't make the situation worse. Midas counts the missing tradable items. Ashfang is still locked safely in storage. The luxury pouch is gone though, and Rook definitely took it. With monsters still roaming the road, Midas ends the chase and secures the people he can actually save. Once the danger settles, Midas clears the last bait harness from the road. He helps the beginners out of the kill box one at a time. Then he photographs the planted horn mechanism before anyone can remove it. The broken party sigil goes into evidence too. Its signature matches the delayed marker that followed them from Aurum. Midas offers medical supplies to the accomplices Rook abandoned. He asks for testimony, but he doesn't threaten them or tie treatment to an answer. Any payment will cover verified records, not whatever story happens to help him most. The first accomplice agrees, mostly because Rook has made loyalty look like a terrible investment. Nearby, Vesper quietly pockets a different stolen trinket. Midas notices and decides that confrontation can wait until nobody is bleeding. Together, they reopen a safe path toward Orem. Then, Midas walks back injured, poorer in consumables and much richer in evidence. Unfortunately, Rook's story reaches Orem before Midas does. Spectators are already repeating that a careless buyer attacked his own guide. Midas leaves the torn shoulder guard visible. Hiding the damage would only help the lie. He checks the public discussion and finds exactly the edit he expected. Every circulating clip starts after the horn and skips the ambush trigger. So Midas uploads the full contract timestamp. The return stone error joins it a second later. Vesper slips away into the arcade while everyone is watching the evidence spread. Midas doesn't chase her. One suspicious person at a time is plenty. He heads straight for adjudication instead. Then a notice arrives saying Rook filed the first complaint. Midas immediately requests evidence preservation, and still bandaged and filthy, he walks into Mara's hearing chamber with the better record. Mara opens by separating Midas's embarrassment from anything the exchange can punish. Buying gear he can't use is not fraud by itself. Midas accepts that part. The equip restriction was there, however obnoxiously it was hidden. Then he submits the shared guarantor behind the planted bids. The documented route contradicts Rook's later directions. The return restriction also began before they left the city. Next comes the hostile action log. Midas identifies the beginners who were never part of the contract. He asks Mara to preserve the proceeds, not hand him a rich guy victory. She tests the claim hard, which is exactly what he wanted from an adjudicator. Midas answers with timestamps instead of outrage. Combat Justice sits outside Mara's office, so Rook won't be arrested here. But market manipulation is very much her problem, and now the case has a shape. Rook appears by projection and immediately hides behind the listing's exact wording. Yes, the equip requirement was technically present. Midas agrees, taking away the easiest part of Rook's defense. Then he asks Mara to open the bidder's funding records. Rook objects on privacy grounds, which is a bold concern from the man who staged an ambush. The guarantor agreement already contains a disclosure clause. Mara uses it, and the linked deposits come into view. Two supposedly competing bids were funded through the same shell account. Rook calls that promotional support because fraud apparently needed rebranding. Midas adds the private demonstration promise. Its route leads directly to the ambush site. He keeps every argument tied to a documented conflict. By the time Mara locks the record, Rook's legal shield is starting to look extremely decorative. Midas posts a reward for verified testimony outside the hearing. The payment applies only to facts that can be corroborated. There is no immunity, no ownership clause, and no demand for loyalty. The first signed statement arrives almost immediately. Its horn order matches Rook's timestamp. Then a second witness confirms the false party markers. Both accomplices were paid almost nothing for taking nearly all the risk. Midas offers them no guild contract and makes no attempt to own their future. Mara questions each witness separately. Rook threatens them with breach penalties from the projection. The system reveals those penalties were never enforceable in the first place. That is enough for one accomplice to expose the shell seller network. Midas adds the full map to evidence, and suddenly Rook's little auction trick has a lot more addresses. Mara summarizes only what the records actually prove. She rejects the simple buyer remorse claim because Midas did choose to buy the sword. Then she freezes the linked auction proceeds. Every connected seller receives a disputed network notice. Ashfang's sale stays under review while the funding trail is checked. Rook himself is not detained, and Midas accepts that limit. Instead, he asks for a public warning on the network. Mara approves the narrow disclosure without turning it into a public conviction. Rook cuts the projection before anyone can watch him lose more gracefully. Midas refuses to celebrate while restitution is still unresolved. He thanks the witnesses for taking the risk. Then he pays exactly the verified rewards he promised. The case remains open, but Rook's money is no longer moving. Outside the chamber, warning sigils are already appearing on connected stalls. Buyers cancel pending trades faster than the sellers can explain them. Naturally, a few people blame Midas for manipulating the market. He corrects them. Mara followed the records, and the records were ugly. One merchant offers to sell him the distressed network at a discount. Midas actually says no, proving the shoulder injury did not destroy all impulse control. He watches Trust change prices more quickly than any purchase he made that morning. Then he asks Mara how long the review will take. Her answer is simple: evidence sets the clock, not wealth. Midas accepts it without trying to buy a faster one. The ledger gets updated with the real cost of the ambush. Across the arcade, Vesper is waiting beside a closed stall. Midas approaches her carefully because returning from one trap does not make the next smile harmless. Vesper greets him like she wasn't just looting the same disaster she helped stop. Then she tosses back his missing luxury pouch. Midas catches it with his uninjured hand. He checks the seal instead of immediately accusing her. Vesper claims she took it from one of Rook's couriers. When Midas asks what else she kept, she answers with a smile that is basically a confession. No item list, no apology, and definitely no receipt. Instead, she claims he owes her one future favor. Midas rejects anything that undefined on principle, so he offers one bounded favor with terms to be agreed later. Vesper enjoys the negotiation far more than a normal person should. She warns that next time she might keep the valuable prize. Then she disappears into the evening crowd, leaving Midas unsure whether he just settled a debt or scheduled another problem. Back in a private room, Midas finally sits down and audits himself. The ruined shoulder guard comes off first. Mechanical skill goes at the top of the deficit list. Local knowledge is second. Trustworthy guidance is third, and that one bothers him the most. For once, money does not appear under solution. He reviews every consumable he burned during the fight. Some were necessary, others were expensive substitutes for experience. Then he replays the moment Ashfang rejected him in the middle of the ambush. The sword gets locked away until he earns the proficiency to use it. Vesper's intervention remains helpful, effective, and completely unreliable. So Midas opens a new contract interface. This time, he is not buying power. He is looking for someone who can teach him how not to die. The first milestone is route safety because today's route tried to murder him. The second is mechanics coaching. The third covers local markets, scams, and all the things rich beginners apparently learn through blood loss. The contract includes a fixed duration and clear exit rights. Hidden exclusivity is forbidden. Midas sets the salary above the common rate, although above is doing heroic work in that sentence. Payment is split across verified performance milestones. The guide keeps ownership of any discoveries they bring in. Midas also gets no control over their other work. Both sides must disclose safety risks. The system accepts the structure but flags one obligation as too broad. Midas removes it instead of trying to lawyer around the warning. Then he saves a contract designed to fund expertise without purchasing the person who has it. Midas carries the finished contract to Orum's public notice board. The moment he posts it, the salary becomes the only number anyone can see. A crowd forms so quickly you'd think he dropped another legendary weapon. One player calls the offer a trap. Midas opens every term for public inspection. He explains the milestones, the equipment budget, and the complete lack of ownership language. Someone asks whether the guide can walk away. Yes, either side can leave under the written exit terms. Applicants demanding full payment before an interview are rejected. Copied resumes go into the same pile. Midas keeps his real identity hidden behind the name everyone already knows. Then he sets a short interview window. The alerts arrive by the dozen, and Orum discovers that free money attracts experts, opportunists, and at least one marriage proposal. The first wave of applications is exactly as chaotic as expected. One candidate wants the entire salary up front. Rejected. Another submits a resume copied from a guide standing 3 stalls away. Midas asks the next applicant for actual route evidence. Hidden in the response is an exclusivity addendum that would lock him into future payments. That application disappears immediately. A modest ranger profile remains unread near the bottom of the queue. Midas publishes the same rules for everyone instead of negotiating private shortcuts. Someone offers secret combat exploits and gets rejected even faster. Then Midas builds an interview scorecard. Safety and teaching ability count for more than prestige. He closes the public question window before the board becomes a full-time circus. Only verified applications move forward, including that quiet ranger he still hasn't opened. Now Midas turns every mistake from the ambush into an interview question. How do you read alternating aggro pulses? What can disable a return stone without triggering a citywide alert? Then he adds a practical route reading test based on Rook's fake detour. Ashfang stays sealed until the proficiency problem is solved properly. His basic novice gear gets repaired because apparently surviving once has not made it fashionable. He sets a fixed training budget for consumables. An offer for instant power leveling gets rejected. He has finally met a shortcut expensive enough to distrust. Mara sends over the public fraud advisory. Midas attaches it to the contract so every candidate sees what happened. Interview slots are identical and evenly timed. One remains open for the overlooked ranger application. Then the verified invitations go out and the next stage of his education officially begins. Every invitation carries the same terms with no secret upgrade for whoever flatters him best. The meeting point stays inside Aurum where return travel works. Either side can cancel without a penalty. The first lesson will be a mechanics assessment, not a shopping trip. Ashfang remains sealed in storage. Midas reviews the 3 deficits one last time: skill, local knowledge, and people he can trust. Money can fund the practice, but it cannot perform the practice for him. With that finally understood, he closes the ambush ledger. Then one last verified application lands in the queue. It belongs to Luna, a launch day ranger with excellent survival numbers and very little patience for nonsense. Across Aurum, she receives the absurdly generous invitation and assumes it is either bait or stupidity. Then she notices the careful exit rites, and that is enough to earn Midas a meeting. Next time, Midas meets the ranger who won't let him substitute money for competence. Subscribe to Marked Manhwa and come back for episode 3.